Athletor Podcast is back at you. Kevin Ward, thank you so much, Coach, for coming on and saying hello to us.
Yeah, for sure, man. It's my pleasure. It's good to be with you guys.
Well, you say that. I got to tell you, every time I think about your job, it gives me like I get anxious because you pile and I know you're gonna take the road of like, well, it's a blessing, and you might be right. I'm just saying, when I think about an NCAA coaching job and all that it entails in 2023, because it ain't just high crotches anymore. Okay.
Yeah.
But then you take on the added layer. I'm going to call it a hurdle. I'm sure you're looking at it as a positive, but you add in the added wrinkle of being at West Point. And it's so interesting to me. And first of all, kudos for the amazing job that you've done so far.
Yeah.
But how do you do it? How do you do all of it? Because it's not just high crotches, right?
No, I mean, it's not just wrestling, but I mean, it is a wrestling coaching job. And I think wherever you're coaching, anybody that's the head coach will tell you there's a lot more to it than just showing technique. And I mean, the way it is now, you can learn technique. Just, all you need is a phone or a laptop, and you can
bunch of dopes doing that stuff on video on the internet.
Yeah. How do we do it? I don't know. It's just consistent day-to-day work. It's nothing spectacular usually. It's just show up and have a plan and work it. And there's West Point creates some unique challenges, that's for sure. I don't call them hurdles or roadblocks or whatever, some other people might, but I mean, it's a tough job. Flat out, it's a tough job. Along with that come a lot of really rewarding successes, overcoming those challenges, and like the end product that we play a part in here, like that we're trying to create. It's a pretty rewarding place to coach. And so, I mean, honestly, I know it's a tough job, and I look at it as it's a challenging job, but I'd never look at it as like we're up against these certain roadblocks or whatever.
Sure. No, that makes sense. But there are some real benefits too, right? So like, I was talking to my wife about it because my son is really into wrestling, and she's, immediately she hears Army and she freaks, like, right? Yeah. Like, cause she's like, oh my God, he's going to be in Ukraine. I'm like, relax, Right. And she goes, well, what do you mean? I go, well, listen, first of all, free education. Okay. That's numero uno as far as I'm concerned. Deal. Okay. Number two, you got a job. You have there's no better career placement school in the country as far as I'm concerned, right?
Yeah, 100%.
So you got a job after college. After you get a degree, you got a job. So I guess, first of all, I did a shitty job of selling it to her because she just like, no. But how do you sell that to moms, right?
Yeah, they're bringing the big guns. Come on.
Right. I'm sorry. I apologize. I did not do that. I will make sure that you will sit next to us at dinner sometime.
I mean, look, I tell everyone and this, like, there's a typical recruiting scenario how it plays out. Is you call a kid and you're like, hey, Kevin Ward, I'm coach at West Point and really like what we've seen out of you. Congrats on the success. And, do you know much about us? Oh, we've seen you wrestle. What about the school? Do you know much about West Point? And the kid's usually like, I've heard of the school. I know a little bit. Like, okay, what can you tell me? And not much, really, And then, so the kid is like, their interest is piqued, but they're not like, they don't know a ton about us. Sure. On those first few phone calls. The dad, however, is usually freaking pumped. Dads get it, they like what it represents, the young people that graduate from West Point, what their character is, and
just this history.
The gravity of the place. And the moms are scared to death. So that's typically it. It's like, listen, we had a kid in here a couple weeks ago. We can't tell you who because it's a recruit, but both parents were in the military. Mom's still scared to death.
Really?
Yeah. So usually the kid is pretty interested. The dad's really interested. The mom's like, hell no.
Right.
Until you have some more conversations and people learn that, like, okay, like you don't have to graduate from West Point and jump straight into a Call of Duty video game in real life. Like there's other paths that you can take in the Army when you graduate. So it's just, recruiting at West Point's like recruiting everywhere else, but you just have much more and much different conversations with families and recruits than you would at, any other school.
What's the most common misconception?
Well, okay. So, I wouldn't call this a misconception, but the first rejection is that, my baby's not going to the Army. That's my baby. I mean, moms see their kids when they're 18 years old, they still see their little 5-year-old kid running around and not my baby. The biggest misconception I would say is that like everybody here at West Point grew up wanting to go into the Army, and they're just like the stereotypical Army kid. It couldn't be further from the truth. I would say like we have a big roster of about 50 wrestlers, and probably 47 of the 50 had no idea they would end up at West Point. Like that wasn't their plan. It became their plan through the recruiting process, but they didn't set out for a career in the Army and wanting to go to West Point. Just the more they learn about the benefits here, I think the more attractive it becomes.
I'm sorry. Speaking of Army, I got Navy jets going. Like there's an air show this weekend in San Diego.
Well, we would never do that to you. That's just
see that? The Blue Angels. You son of a gun. That is well played, sir. You just slipping jabs. You don't even. That's well fun. Well,
is it me or is it them? Are they doing that all? They hear about the podcast? They're drowning us out or what? I don't know. This is chess, not checkers.
Call Cole at. Let him know. So okay, if they don't grow up being the, I don't know, quintessential Army kid,
okay,
when do you see it flip? When do you see it change?
I would ask you, okay, what is the quintessential Army?
I have
kid?
no idea, but you said I don't even know what that means, right? So like they didn't grow up like wanting to I'm sure that there are a few that like from the time that they were babies, they were like, I'm going to West Point, this is what I'm doing. But I think that those are probably further and farther between. At what point in their lives do they generally go, this is a really solid option for me? Is it just an intellectual decision, or is it more of like, oh, this makes sense to me?
Yeah, I think they come to a realization that, okay, this does make sense. But yeah, I mean, it's few and far between the ones that grow up knowing they want to go to West Point. It's even fewer and further between when you have those kids that are actually good wrestlers that are going to make it at this level of wrestling Division I. So there's basically, none of those kids out there. There are a few. We've been lucky enough to have a few, but yeah, that's a tough one. It's a decision that they make once they learn about the opportunities. I mean, you mentioned some of them. It's an elite education for free. You graduate with zero debt. You have money in the bank because you get paid while you're here. And then you launch into this proven roadmap of success. All you have to do is follow the plan for the next 5 years, and you're guaranteed to be successful. And you don't have to create it. You don't have to like decide what, or make these critical decisions about what you're going to do. Like this roadmap is laid out in front of you. Your biggest decision is, do you want to have a career after 5 years, or do you want to get out and go do something else? That's a big decision point. But I think the more you learn about that is we're able to offer kids a scholarship that we think they're worth, full scholarship. We're not offering them 20% or a book scholarship or, something that's basically a slap in the face saying you're really good, but we think you're about a third of a scholarship good. And so there's
that's gotta be such a shitty conversation to have as a coach. Be like, yeah, I'm here, but you're still only getting 30%.
Yeah, I don't have to do that.
No,
and that's one of the things I'm thankful for. So yeah, I think through the recruiting process, and we do things the right way. And really, I think when people make their decision up is when they come on their official visit and they're able to spend a couple days with our team, because you can learn all this information, you can learn about the benefits, but until you hang out with the team, like you have no idea what they're really like. They're the best salesmen that we have. So we try to get recruits with our team as much as we can.
I'm curious, is it a help or a hindrance to have a big name like Kerry Cole at one of your biggest rival schools?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a rival school. I don't think I've ever thought about it that way. Does it help or does it not? I've been here 10 years now. We've recruited against the other academies all 10 years, and you win some, you lose some. And it's been the same with whatever coaching staff is in place. It's a fair question, but I think it does elevate the rivalry a little bit. There's nothing negative about having somebody that brings attention to it. So no, honestly, Joel, I don't think I've ever thought about it that way, but just my knee jerk reaction is, well, one, I'm not going to think about it that way once we stop talking about it. But two, it can't hurt. Yeah. Why not? We want all the attention that we can get on the rivalry that we have.
I want to get into the kind of coaching carousel that has been taking place over the last few.
Yeah, it's been wild, right?
It's crazy. And I don't know if I can remember a year that it was this crazy, but I'm sure it's just recency bias.
Maybe the year I got hired 10 years ago, it was wild. Yeah, it's been that long.
Tell me a little bit about that year.
Oh shit, I don't remember everybody else that went in front of me. I just remember there was a lot of turnover that year. And I got hired here late. The crazy thing about me getting hired here is, so when I was at Ouachita Baptist before coming here, I lived with an assistant basketball coach there, young guy like me, and we lived together. We got along. We were hanging out. We were both workaholics, and we'd hang out together. And he left there and came here as assistant coach, basketball coach at West Point.
Really?
And yeah, so when he was here, he calls me and he was like, "Are you involved in this job or not?" And I was like, "I don't think so. I was just in this other thing, another coaching search. I ultimately decided I didn't want the job." And I was like, it was kind of exhausting, and I'm staying here. He's like, "Well, I'm going to mention your name to this guy that used to work here, Butikofer." And I was like, "All right, you mentioned my name." And so Butikofer calls me. And one thing leads to another. I tell my wife, I'm like, "I think I'm going to go up to New York and visit this school, but it ain't happening." And
famous last words, by the way.
Yeah, she was like, "Don't do this again," because I almost took another job. Like I actually took the job, and then I didn't take the job the next morning. Okay, so it was exhausting. But then I wasn't their first choice here either. I know that now. At the time, maybe I hope I was, but they really wanted to hire the Steiner brother that was at Oregon State, and I think he decided to stay there. So I was like at least second or third choice here, but yeah, it all worked out. That was 10 years ago, so nobody remembers that. I just tell everybody I was their first choice, and they recruited me really hard.
ain't nobody gonna challenge you on it.
Yeah. Yeah. They came after me. They wanted me bad.
Oh yeah. All right. So the coaching carousel, as it's been this fall or late summer, fall, my brain goes, God, Kevin Ward would be so good at some of these gigs. And now I know you can't be like, oh yeah, I was up for this job or I was up for that job. But when you do think about other people, let's say you got the Stanford job. Okay. Just spitballing. Do you think that the skill set that you built in West Point would help you with another job? Or do you think that it would kind of like shackle you? Like you're not going to have 50 scholarships. Yeah. You're not going to have, you know what I mean? So, but something tells me that there's a skill set that you build in recruiting a specific type of athlete, a specific type of person that would really, really transcend to another school or another institution.
Yeah, I think so. I don't want to answer this and make anybody think that like I'm looking at another job.
Right. And that's not the way I wanted it to come across. I apologize. Right. But I just wanted to be.
Okay, so I think some people from the outside may think exactly what you said. They may think, 10 years at West Point, Army guy, and like entrenched, and I am. But some people may think that would kind of hold you back. To me, in my mind, no. Like, what could be better preparation? Like, we recruit so much here. And when I'm hiring assistant coaches, I tell them all the time, like, you're going to get 3 years of experience every year you're here, just because of the volume of work that we do. You're going to go on more recruiting trips. You're going to have more people visiting campus. You're going to be on more phone calls. Like, you're going to work more here than anywhere else. You're going to get 3 years of experience every season that you're here. And I think one thing that you learn here is just how to overcome really unique challenges. Like, I mean, I have no problem saying this is the most demanding environment in Division I athletics. Like it is, or the most challenging and demanding. Yeah, just say that. Like, I mean, I get winning is hard everywhere. And what, like, okay, Penn State's been winning. What they're doing, that's not easy. Like, they're working like crazy to do it. So I'm just saying the challenges we face are a little bit different. And when you learn how to navigate and overcome some unique challenges, I mean, what could prepare you better for something else? But I'm here, you know, we love it here.
Yeah, no, that's not a question. Why do you say to your assistant coaches that you get 3 years of experience in each year that you're there? What is it, just the bar that you set, or is it just you don't have a choice but to use that type of volume? And
well, yeah, if you want to do it right, and you want to work for me, that's the way it's going to go. Because, okay, we bring in about 15 freshmen a year total.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's what is it, you know, close to 3 times what most people bring in. And to bring in 3 times more than most schools, you think you only have to work 3 times harder? No, you better recruit, you know, 5 or 6 times more to get to that, because, you know, our funnel shrinks really quickly. You know, so we cast a wide net, it shrinks down. Yes, I think just the other, this is it's a unique institution where you have to, I wouldn't call it red tape, but there's things you have to navigate here that you probably don't have to do anywhere else. So learning how to work through those things it's just more work, I think, than other places. Not harder, you know, other people are working hard too. It's just, you know, the volume of work that you do here is more than most places.
Okay, so what can I tell because I think my son would be a great candidate to go into West Point. What are you looking for in recruits, and how is it different than what everyone else in the country is looking for?
Well, I think the first thing we're looking for is the exact same thing. Like if I ran through a checklist of the 3 things I'm looking at in order, it's like, 1, can they compete and win at this level? Because if you can't do that, nothing else matters. I mean, it's college athletics, and winning matters. And we're at a place where you talk about, like, if somebody's to go off to war, like, you can't be runner up, you know, like, winning really matters.
There ain't no silver medal.
There's no second place points, you know.
Boy, that's might be the darkest that we've gotten on this podcast.
It's hard though, right? Yeah. Like, listen, winning matters. There's no runner up. You don't get a silver medal. So you got to be able to compete and win. And then you have to be able to get into school here, which means you have to have the academics and you have to have the resume that gets you into school. And the third thing we're looking at is, do we even want you? Like, do we like you? Because we've had kids that are good wrestlers with decent transcripts too, and they come on a visit and we're like, no, I don't want to be around this kid. I don't want to coach him. The guys on the team are like, I don't want to be around. I don't want to train with him. I don't want him sitting at the lunch table, you know, like things like, so it's like, I mean, we're looking for the same things, except they have to be, I want wrestlers that wrestling while they're doing it is the most important thing to them, because the clock is ticking every day. Like, you've got 5 years to do it and the clock's ticking, but they also have to understand that when that clock strikes midnight and you hang the wrestling shoes up, you have to move on from there. So that's what I'm looking for. People that love wrestling and it's everything to them, but they also understand that they need more when wrestling's done.
Oh, that's interesting. You hear stories that it takes similar grades that as an Ivy League institution. Is that accurate? Would you say that that's accurate? Like, is it almost the equivalent?
It depends on which Ivy League institution you're talking about. Okay, so
wow, that's a shot at the ag program at Cornell, and you know it, Kevin Ward.
Well, listen, I'm just saying we've recruited a lot of the same people, and the point is, like, it's probably very similar. It like, as far as acceptance, you don't have to have what people would typically think as Ivy League transcript and Ivy League scores. No. So when we decide to offer somebody a spot, you know, the way I say it is, like, usually the door to get into West Point's about this big. And if I want to support them and offer them one of my spots, the door becomes this big, you know, so it's the only way to have a winning Division I athletic program, any sport,
Yeah.
is that, yeah, we can get kids in that academically, listen, like academically, most of our team doesn't belong at West Point.
I love that. I
Yeah.
love that. But something tells me that they do just fine once they're there.
They graduate at a higher rate than the general student body, the wrestling team does.
Really?
And they don't belong. You know, it just speaks to like what wrestling can do for you. If you want to figure something out and get it done, these guys are tough enough and stubborn enough to figure it out, and they'll get it done.
Man, that's awesome to hear.
Yeah.
Is that common for most of the sports on campus?
Probably. Yeah. I don't, you know, I mean, I'm a wrestling guy. So, I mean, I live in this world right here. I would imagine it's probably pretty similar.
Man, it does go a long way to say to a mom who might be trepidatious, who might be like a little squeamish, you know, just picturing their kid in that uniform, to go, listen, they're gonna, we know, but they're gonna excel here. Is that a conversation that you look forward to having? Because I would like, that would be the one that I'm like, okay, I gotta get this number in front of mom, right? Because dad's in, dad is in, right?
Yeah, that's it. It's like, look, here's and the academic support here is like, it's so impressive and it's real, you know, it's like genuine help and assistance, and it's real. So yeah, once we show people that, it's like, look, if you come here, you're guaranteed. It's 10 times harder to fail out of West Point than it is to get in. Like, you can't fail out here unless you really want to leave.
Right.
And that's a comforting thing. And then just, you know, learning that when you graduate, how much support goes into your career when you're done. There's such an investment in every cadet that comes through here, wrestling or not, that they're well taken care of when they leave. That's a huge investment that the U.S. government's made in each of these graduates. So they're going to take care of them when they leave too.
Yeah, that's interesting, man. Okay. I've been on campus. You were kind enough to show me around and stuff like that. There's some incredible history on that campus. What's your favorite part? Like, what's your favorite West Point story throughout history? Because okay, I'm sorry. I'm not even going to influence your decision. Go ahead.
I doubt you would, but I would love to hear yours. Like, yeah, this is a place where I like to call it like the gravity of the place. You can feel it when you're here. I mean, my favorite place at West Point is right out there, our wrestling room. I'm in my office right now. The wrestling room's about 20 feet that way. That's I probably should say my house is a favorite. We live on post. Right. My house with my family is my favorite place. Wrestling room, right there with it. Mm-hmm. No, I mean, I think when you look back, it's like, so West Point was originally, you know, not an academy. It was a fortification, like an army fort during the Revolutionary War. Mm-hmm. And so when you're out walking around here, like, it's not a stretch of the imagination to think that George Washington also walked right where you're at. And these leaders from, you know, the founding years of our country. Like, I mean, that's a pretty unique thing. So I mean, I think for me, it's like knowing that it dates back, not just the academy was started in 1802, but you've got to go back even further to think about the history of where we're at. So I think just being involved in that and feeling that, you know, every day that you're here is pretty special.
The key marks on Benedict Arnold's plate.
Yeah.
Probably
they wiped him out, right?
Yeah. It's one of my favorite things in the world. So for those of you that don't know, Benedict Arnold's nameplate was on. What building is that in, Kevin? Do you remember?
Well, it was the old the old chapel outside the cemetery. So this was Fort Arnold. He was the commanding colonel of the base, and this is the place that he fled. Like, this was his last stop as an American soldier. He fled American grounds right here. Like, he got on a boat, rode down the Hudson River, got onto a British boat from there. But this is the place where he left, and then they scratched his name out of history.
So the cadets actually take their keys and scratch the name out. It's just one of the coolest. Like, and you can go and see it, and it's like literally right there. Like,
right.
I don't know. It's to me, it's really, really interesting. But I'm such a nerd with that stuff. Okay. What do we not know about the personality of the team, right? Because man, I've been around those guys. Some of them are goofballs. Some of them are just total goofballs, right?
Yeah.
So what do we not know about the cadets at West Point?
I think, if you've been around a wrestling team, you know everything about them. And that's what most people don't realize, is they're just like a normal wrestling team. They're just willing to be held to a higher standard when they leave practice than most people. But they're clowns, man. Like, you got 50, 18 to 22 or 3-year-olds from across the country. Like, I mean, the personalities run every spectrum, the full length of the spectrum. It's like, if you've been around a wrestling team, you know what our guys are like. I guess what sets them apart, like, they genuinely have a love for each other. They're not afraid to say they love each other. They're not just like, hey, we're buddies. They're like, no, I love you, which is a cool thing to be around. So they're really tight. They care about each other a lot. So there's a different bond here. But I mean, when it boils down to it, they're clowns, like every personality. We have the nerds and, the bookworms and straight-laced kids that just want that. And we have the ones that, like, you got to keep pulling them back into the middle because they'll run into a ditch, But yeah, they're just like a normal wrestling team. They're just willing to be held to a higher standard outside of practice.
Can you maybe explain what you mean by, held to a higher standard to someone who may not know what life at West Point is like?
Well, it's just, it's a place that can intimidate people because everybody wants your best in everything that you do. And it's a good lesson for young people to learn, is that you have to learn how to prioritize where you want to be great. You're not going to be great at everything that you do. You can strive to be, but you have to make some decisions and what areas you really want to focus. Because when they go to class in the morning, if they go to a physics class, that physics instructor or professor thinks that that's the most important thing in the world, and they're going to demand each cadet's very best in that class. And then you're going to go somewhere else and they're going to demand your very best. And then when you go and you meet with another officer here and they're talking about developing, your character as a leader, they're going to say that's the most important thing that you could possibly be focused on. It's just a place where everybody expects your best. And now, if you sit back and you think about, like, what would you expect from a West Point cadet?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the American public expects a lot out of these young men and women. And not many people are willing to live up to that. That's why there's only 4,000 of them here that are willing to do it. But that's what I mean by it, is like, you're expected to give your best at everything you do, not just.
What is the graduation rate just on campus in general?
Yeah, so it's around 85-ish%. I'd have to check.
Right, but to give, that's still pretty.
Yeah, well, it's insanely high.
Yeah, that's
where most colleges are lucky to hit 50%.
Yeah, that's pretty kind of nuts. I didn't.
Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting. Okay. What adjustments do, like, freshmen have? Like, so I like when they walk in, what is the biggest thing that they struggle with? Is it the disciplinary stuff? Is it the workload? What do they struggle with?
I think it's the volume of the work on the front end. And then eventually, like, one of the most valuable skills they're going to learn here is how to manage their time and prioritize things. And that's what takes the most time to figure out, is just how to manage your time. Because they've always been able to make it, and they're tough and they're stubborn and they're like, oh, I'll figure it out. You're like, well, you might want to plan ahead just a little bit. And learning how to do that, I think is the biggest adjustment. Because once they do, like, and I don't mean this doesn't sound like a great endorsement. You don't have to be brilliant to graduate from West Point.
Right.
You just have to be willing to work.
Yeah.
And so, but the ones that are brilliant, sometimes they struggle because everything's always come easy to them. But putting all of that together, like learning how to put in work and manage your time, that's usually the biggest adjustment, time management.
How do you help them through that? Like, is there a process in place?
Yeah. I mean, even down to like the daily planners that we provide, to really help them structure. Eventually, everybody learns that this discipline and structure helps you out, because it helps you maximize and bring out your best. But that's, even down to like I said, the coaches giving them daily planners that are very detailed, and, plenty of examples here to follow. So freshmen come in and they have, 49 brothers on the team already.
Right.
and people looking out for them, from day one. So it's just making sure that they're around the right people and following the right examples.
What it's hard to say. A lot of coaches come on this show and tell us how they're going to win national titles. That's really, I don't think anyone recognized, and not that the coaches don't, but I don't think that like when Jared Fair comes on the show and says we are committed to winning a national title, I think that looks different than it does in West Point. I think that the recipe that success, it just looks different. What are the things that you have to take into account that maybe a Virginia Tech, Ohio State, give it a name, doesn't have to take into account?
Yeah, a good question. I mean, what I want to say is I don't want to take other things into account. And when these guys are done and they look back on their careers, they will be so pissed off if I gave them that little bit of leniency. Like, I'm taking this into account because my expectations are lower for you because you're at a tough school. Like, screw that. But I'd be lying too if I said, like, I get where I'm at and I get the big picture of the place. And I know that some days it's like you've got to coach them really hard to get the most out of them at practice. But I don't, we're committed to it. Everybody's working hard. I don't want to say I'm more committed to it than somebody else, and because other coaches are working hard too. But I'll promise you this: nobody else is more committed to it than I am.
Right.
Right. Maybe the difference is, and this isn't you mentioned Virginia Tech. I'm not talking about Virginia Tech or any other school in particular. I'm just saying that here you have to win while upholding certain standards outside of wrestling. Is that different than other places? I don't know, but that's a reality here.
Well, I will say this, integrity as a human seems to be far higher on the priority list at West Point than anywhere else. I've seen you guys kick out stellar athletes, and there's a specific code of conduct. And a lot of coaches, look, I'll be completely honest, man, the highest level coaches in this sport have gone back on some team rules because the athlete was special.
Yeah.
And I've not seen that at all out of West Point, and that's really encouraging to me.
I mean, I would say that if developing someone's character is not your number one priority every day that you're here, you won't make it. So it's character and living up to a certain set of standards and values. But you can't compromise those to win. Can't. So, I mean, you mentioned that earlier in the conversation, like, what are some obstacles? Maybe that's one. If you want to look at it, to me, like, that fits who I am. I don't want to overlook those things, and I don't have any pressure to overlook them here. So for me, that's, one of the blessings of the job. But I mean, it's a reality too, because I've seen it and I've heard other coaches say it publicly, about this guy's not wrestling, then they're wrestling. Here there's certain things you just can't.
There's no wiggle room. There's no wiggle room. And that's, and here's the truth of the matter, and take from this what you will. My wife and I speak every once in a while, and she's like, well, why don't you put in for that job? I'm like, first of all, I wouldn't get it. Second of all, I don't want it. I wouldn't want Tom Ryan's job if you offered me the job tomorrow. I wouldn't take it. There's just no chance. And it's not because I'm on this moral high horse. There are just so many different concessions that you have to make along the way. And eventually, and I'm not saying that Tom makes these concessions. I'm using Ohio State as the inflated Big Ten job, right? But like a job like West Point or Navy or those kind of make sense to me. I don't know. I think that it probably falls in line a little bit more with like like me as a dad, I don't give a shit if my son ever wins a wrestling match. I really don't. I just genuinely don't. I just need him to be a good dude. And so, like, if you start there, I think that is probably the best indicator for a guy, indicator for success at an institution like West Point. Is that about right?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Look, I mean, the reality of it is, like, you can't always live your life in black and white. It's like you want to be principled and you want to be value driven, but the world is messy and real life is like there's a gray area everywhere. It's just at West Point that gray area is much smaller. You know, some places
it looks more black and white.
Yeah, it looks more. But I mean, listen, I'm as guilty as anybody in my personal life. Like you can't everything's not always black and white. So I'm not, other coaches have to make decisions that are best for their program and everybody that's in it. And I'm not judging people based on that, because you never know what the situation's like unless you're in it, unless you're them. We can sit back here and speculate, but you don't know until you're there.
Sure.
I think by and large, wrestling's made up of a lot of really good people that are, building really good people through the sport.
I feel like we got real deep into the details of maybe some of the negative side of going to West Point. What are some of the kind of surprising things that, some of the, recruits or somebody who comes on campus, what are they kind of surprised by that's like, oh, this is way cooler than I thought?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, if we just covered all of the bad, then like it's a pretty freaking good place, man. What's so bad? Your instructors, they want a lot out of you. And you're going to be expected to like uphold a standard, but no, it's like, I think what surprises most people is when they come here, like just how personable and easy to get along with that the team is. Because, from the outside, and I did too, before I got the job. Well, I guess when I got the job, before I showed up, I was like, what are these guys going to be like, man? I was coaching a bunch of, Oklahomans and some Arkansans and like Missouri and Texas kids where I was at before. And like that's where I'd spent the last 10 years of my life before that. So those were my people. So I'm like, what are these kids going to be like? And then you show up and you're like, oh, thank God. They're just like normal. So that's it. It's like you're around a bunch of driven people, but that they're not robots. They're just like you. They're just really driven. So it's a very positive place to be around if you care about being around, driven, motivated people.
Can I interject and say what I was most surprised with there, Joel?
Yeah. Like I said, and I want to hear
dude,
all your opinions.
The gadgets are awesome. I'm like a tech dude, not tech dude, but like I like gadgets. And oh boy, did they got some cool toys.
Dude, we got some they get some cool stuff here for sure.
Well, tell them about the simulation room and stuff like that.
Sick. Yeah, it's so it's a practice range. Like when you're here, you can go out and you shoot your guns at a range, and but they have like an indoor range, and it can be. I mean, it's basically like the screen's 20 feet wide, 10 feet tall, and you're shooting like real guns into it. It can be target practice. It can be simulated battles or whatever. But I mean, the guns range from like a little pew pew, all the way to, shoulder mounted rocket launchers and the machine guns in between.
And they feel pretty darn real, dude. They got a little kick to them. Like it's fun, dude. It's a lot.
We had a group of 12 recruits in there a couple weeks ago, and we had 12 guns going at the same time. It was sick. Yeah.
There's some dope gadgets on campus there.
I mean, those are just the handheld ones too. Like, there's tanks and helicopters and some other big stuff too. Like, I mean, it's a cool, really cool place. Like if you're like a man's man, like you'd love it.
Yeah, it's fun. All right, let's rattle off some questions here. Your favorite wrestling shoe of all time? Go.
Damn, my favorite wrestling shoe?
Yeah.
We're a Nike school. All right. So I love my Inflicts.
Okay.
I didn't wear those in high school, but I loved those shoes I wore in high school. But we're a Nike school. So Inflicts are sick.
Allegiances be damned. Okay.
Listen, I ain't trying to get fined, Mike.
Get that on me, Kevin Ward. Don't you?
I can't afford that fine. I'm sending this straight to you.
I'll make sure to sign off on it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Now, this question, whether you realize it or not, you have my absolute favorite answer for it that you did in an interview a long time ago with me.
Okay.
And if you repeat the answer, I will be very happy. But if you don't, it's fine too, because something tells me you got some good stuff anyway. If you had a magic wand and you could change one thing about the sport of wrestling, what would it be?
I don't know what I told you last time.
Good. I'm glad, because I'm going to tell you in a little bit, and then we can move on from there. But go ahead.
Okay, so I live my answer's probably changed, but I live in the college wrestling world.
Yeah.
And for me, like I'm worried about college wrestling. And so right now, I mean, there was probably like some major like structural changes I think are really important. If I had to wave a wand now, I don't think that the conference realignment, and I don't think that having like high major Power 4 schools competing in the same conference as what would normally be considered a lower mid-major school, I don't think that's good. Like I don't like the way that our sport is going. I don't like the way college athletics is going. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that our sport is positioned very well to handle it. I mean, I shouldn't say that. I'm worried about how we're positioned, I guess I should say.
Yeah.
That's not the answer I gave you 7 or 8 years ago, for sure.
No, but here's what's funny about that. It's a different world than it was then.
Completely different.
Dude, and I'm not just saying the wrestling world, okay? Like, this was pre-COVID, and everyone was light and airy, and all things were rosy, and it was just different.
Yeah.
The answer that you gave, and as goofy as this sounds, it just struck me. You're like, why are we wearing ankle bands? Yes. We can't figure out who's red and who's green.
That's a symptom of a larger problem. That, like,
sure.
Seriously, are we still living 100 years ago where the only way to tell the difference in two people, like you're wearing $400 or $500 worth of equipment, and the only way you can tell the difference is a 50-cent piece of plastic around your ankle? Like, come on, we can't do better than that. I still listen. I would change bigger things, but God, please, can we get rid of ankle bands?
It's such nonsense. It's
so stupid, man.
Like, there are so many rules. Like, explaining to people. Okay, so a very good friend of mine that I have here in San Diego. His name is Chris Federa. His daughters wrestle for me. He did not really grow up wrestling. Okay, he wrestled a little bit in high school. He was on Staten Island. That doesn't count. Okay, and he'll love to hear that. But he comes to me with these questions, like, why does everyone in wrestling have a mullet? Like, and I'm like, well, it's actually, there's a systemic reason. And he's like, no, there's not. I'm like, no, there really is, because up until very recently, you had to have your hair below your earlobe, and so, but there was no real restriction past the shirt line. Okay, so systemically, we created a culture that if you wanted to in any way rebel with long hair, you had to have a mullet in order to be legal, right? Yeah. So it's like, it's nonsense. It's ridiculous.
Dude, it's so funny. Like, you mentioned that because before this call today, I was just watching some film, and I try to watch, however many minutes of wrestling a day, and I was watching old Lincoln McElravy film today. Like the OG.
That is the wrestling mullet. That is the wrestling mullet.
How freaking good was that guy?
So his elbow. So that's the thing, right? People don't recognize like how good he was from elbows when everyone else was, especially in Iowa, was inside and they were pulling hands and hand fighting like that. That dude would just disappear on you. He was mean and fast and slick.
I don't know anything he wasn't good at. From watching him, you're like, he could do everything, absolute animal. But I don't want to hijack your conversation.
No. By all means, those are the best. Okay. The Mount Rushmore of wrestling. Who's on it?
Oh man, like are we going all the way back?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Let's go back.
Yeah. Okay, so man, I mean, Dan Gable's got such a name, you know, and well, because of what he did as a wrestler and a coach, but it's, you know, it's hard for me. I'm 40 years old, so I grew up like, you know, Dan Gable, like that was, you know, when I was wrestling in the 90s. So that to me, he would have to be on it just because of his influence on the sport overall. I mean, you know, John Smith and what he did. But then you look at like Bruce Baumgartner with all his medals, and like what Lee Kemp and Kenny Monday did is like before a lot of black guys were winning medals, like, you know, like they were pioneers. And but I'm a huge fan of what's going on with USA Wrestling right now. But yeah, like I'm a huge Jordan Burroughs, Kyle Snyder fan. What Taylor and Dake were able to do, I don't know. How are you going to narrow it down, man? Just for me, I look at, you know, Gable's influence on the sport and coaching. The same with Coach Smith, his influence. But then you got to add the only, you know, like, I mean, Pat Smith was the first 4-timer. I didn't even mention him. But what Kel did going undefeated, it's mind blowing. How do you not have a bad day? And
you don't have one bad match. You don't have one bad 7-minute period in your life.
You're not. You're expecting, what was it, 159? Is that what he did? Like, you know, he didn't feel great 159 matches. Like he had to win matches when he didn't feel good and things weren't great. He's got to be on it. I mean, Burroughs. I got to put Burroughs on there just because I mean, at a time when the sport was really in trouble internationally, and then we have this American hero that comes along.
And he does everything right. Like he does everything right.
Yeah. And he's got the charisma and he can light up a TV screen with a smile. And then he backs it up on the mat. Yeah. Like, don't let his smile fool you. He's an absolute freaking terror.
Yeah.
You know?
He's an absolute
a killer. Yeah. So yeah, I guess that's who I would go with.
Thank goodness is he the first person? Excuse me. Is Kevin Ward the first person to say Burroughs on our show? Because like the fact that he's not like one of the first people that people think of is beyond me. Is he?
I don't think so. I feel like we've heard JB before.
Okay, good. I'm glad. I don't have what you call it memory much. But yeah, what he has done. So I actually and I'm thinking about like kind of putting together a video piece on this. I think Dan Gable changed the sport in a big bad way.
Yeah.
He said, without saying the words, and maybe he did say the words, but he said, okay, if you really work hard, you can be successful in this sport. And at the time that was true.
Yeah.
That's probably not as much true anymore. But then John came along, and everything after him was, so it was like the modern era, and then John was like the postmodern era of like, if you really work hard and you focus in on technique, you can really excel in this sport. And then JB has taken those two things and built upon it, and like, oh, now you have to do everything right. Like the days of guys going to the world championships and just rolling out of the bar, you know, after doing shots all night and then stepping on the scale and winning world titles. Those days are gone. These are for real athletes that live, eat, breathe this stuff on a 24-hour basis every day, 365 days a year. And JB is a shining example of that. Like, and he's shown us how to do it. And while I don't know if he'll ever make a team again, right? I don't think anyone does, but man, it was awesome while it lasted.
I mean, I think, his impact, like you mentioned, like Gable's impact, John changed the sport. I mean, Burroughs' impact on, like, he's one of those names everybody knows. And I mean, we're fortunate right now. Like, we could name a lot of people that we want to put on there because our country is so good at wrestling right now. So, like when I said I'm worried about wrestling earlier, like I'm not worried about this, like us, the Americans. Like, wrestling is better than it's ever been in this country.
For sure.
You know, like there's some things in college athletics that worry me, but wrestling is an incredibly great spot.
Yeah, it's it does get squirrely at the Division I level. Okay.
Yeah.
We got to get moving. Kevin Ward, thank you so much for coming on. Is there anything else that people should know about you or how to get a hold of you or anything like that if they have
No.
questions?
Man, I appreciate your guys' time. It's always good to chat wrestling, especially with you guys. I consider you guys, thought leaders in the sport, where we can talk about kind of some other things and not just the details of how you crack somebody down and finish there. But I like that too. But it's fun to talk about, big picture wrestling. No, you can find us. Look for Army West Point Wrestling on Twitter and Instagram. Coach K Ward is mine on Twitter and Instagram. We're out there. Come see us sometime. Like if anybody's even considering, West Point, or if you think that, man, I want to wrestle at a really, really high level, but I don't want to sacrifice my academics or career opportunities afterwards. And the West Point's a place that you have to look at. And we'd love to have some people here on campus.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Coach. I appreciate it, brother.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, guys.